Hello?
Hello, is this Ivan Koloff?
This is Ivan, yes, sir.
Ivan, this is Dustin Wilmus from KMSU in Minnesota.
Yes, sir.
How you doing today?
Yep, doing great. Just hobbling around. Yeah.
Well, is now a good time to ask you some questions?
Sure thing, yes, sir. I was just anticipating your call any minute. So.
All right, well, I'll introduce you first of all to my co-host, Ton.
Hey there, how you doing?
Very good. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Ton, T-O-N, like 2,000 pounds?
All right. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. I'm glad we got a hold of you here today. It's going to be a pleasure. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yep.
Well, you are one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. So why don't you talk to us about how you got started in professional wrestling?
Well, I ended up having a desire, you might say, since 8 years old to pursue wrestling. I guess my parents are responsible for that in a sense that they took us to a neighbor's place that had television and electricity, meaning we didn't have it on the farm growing up, and it had wrestling on, and man, I was excited about that. I watched it. I really was interested in it, and I just started dreaming about being a wrestler and started mentioning that to my parents and brothers and sisters and going around bragging about, hey, I'm going to be a wrestler someday. And, of course, Mom didn't help that. She went around and said, here's my little champ. He's going to be a world champion someday. And, of course, I had to make my brothers, older ones and younger ones, jealous, and they'd end up trying to show me up like wrestling and everything. So I got my wrestling experience kind of early, and just kept that dream until a teenager and went on to a wrestling school after I realized that I couldn't train myself. I didn't know how to do all this stuff, even though we practiced jumping out of the hay loft in the barn and onto the hay and stuff and doing stuff to each other. It's when we didn't kill each other or something, all the crazy stuff. But that was the first start. It was the wrestling desire. Just kept that feeling there that to be a wrestler. And after the wrestling school, after I went there at 19, but they said I wasn't big enough, so that they wanted me to go on the weights and everything. And 6 months later, I just turned 20, I was big enough because I went from 183 pounds to 235 and started bench pressing like 300 pounds. And they were impressed, so they started my training, and ended up just a year later, I was starting to get some matches around Toronto and that and the area because I got trained in Hamilton, Ontario. Worked in the steel company there for a couple of years while I was training and get my feet wet in the wrestling business. But that's about pretty well the start of it there.
So then how did it become you turning into the Russian Bear character? Did you just look the part, or was that somebody's idea for you, or how did that work?
Yeah, that was... I got a trip finally. I left the Toronto area in 65 and went to the West Coast, the British Columbia, and they wrestled down into Washington and Oregon, Portland, Oregon area, and I ended up wrestling out there with the same name that the guy from the school, that owned the school, my teacher, my mentor, ended up giving me, which was Red McNulty, and I wrestled out there. I got some experience, about 2.5 years. When I was 67, I ended up getting a trip to Japan. They hooked me up, guys like Don Leo Jonathan, Dutch Savage, thought that a trip like that really helped me and give me some more experience. Everybody seemed to be real helpful, and, because I was showed so much interest in it, I guess. And ended up meeting the promoter's brother over there in Japan from Montreal, Jacques Rougeau, and I had met him before and just took a liking to each other, and I guess he was impressed. By this time I was close to 300 pounds, and I just moved pretty good, and he was impressed anyway. I had long red hair and a beard, and he said, man, would you shave your hair off and come to Montreal, maybe as a Russian? And that would give us the idea, and just on that, I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay, I'll call my brother. He called his brother, who was part of the promotion, Johnny Rougeau, and they gave a date, just on his word. They gave a date for me to come in, and it was a couple of months later, and I showed up, and they gave me the handle and everything. Ivan Koloff. They said I looked like the little bit like Lenin and the old dictator of Russia, and they thought that to handle Koloff, because there used to be a guy that wrestled around Montreal named Dan Koloff back in, I guess, the 50s and the 60s or whatever. Well, I guess it'd be the 50s because I was there in the 60s. So, and it worked out. Immediately, the people took to the idea. And remember, I wrestled first guys like Mad Dog Vachon. He was, I just passed away, matter of fact, God bless him, just a month ago here. And you see, it was Tony Angelo that they gave me first. I didn't know what was going on, but what they did is Tony had asked to wrestle me. He was impressed because he was over 300 pounds, and I picked him up at inverted backbreaker, and he wanted to see the potential of managing me. Tony did, but he wanted to see if I could wrestle first, because he was impressed enough that he convinced Johnny Rougeau and the promotion there to be my manager. So he was my manager, and I won the Canadian belt, ended up tag team for a while, and back had lost the Canadian belt, won it back again. Anyway, for two and a half years was there, did real good, and got noticed in Montreal or in New York, because Captain Lou Albano and his partner Tony Altamore, the Sicilians, came up to Montreal for a tag team tournament. Ended up, he went back and told Vince McMahon Sr. about me, and they brought me in '69. Wrestled Bruno, my hero, and went away after about a year of wrestling. Couldn't win the belt from him. Went to Australia and got a call back to come back and wrestle him again, and won the belt. So turned around, that Pedro Morales stole it on me. So it's pretty well the way Red McNulty and Ivan Koloff got started. The short version of it, I guess, anyway. But
when you finally made it up to the New York area, can you describe what your feud was like with Bruno Sammartino? You mentioned he was a hero of yours. Was that just something you ever would have imagined that you'd be doing after practicing out in the barn all those years ago?
No, I really didn't ever dream of even becoming a wrestler. I wanted to, but a lot of people wanted. It's just the idea that I wanted enough to go out there and keep pursuing it. And I'd never thought that I'd ever, especially wrestle against my hero Bruno, and then to win the belt against him was really something that was, accomplishment, you might say. But Bruno just got him at the right time. I guess he had been champion 7.5 years. It was quite a grueling task, I guess, to be a champion that long up there. And he was hurt, and got him at the right time to get that belt off him, and which was great. But man, people really reacted weird to that, in a sense. Yes, he was loved so much, Bruno, that whenever the 1, 2, 3 came, they couldn't believe it. They were so quiet. Seemed like the way Bill Apner explains it, like a funeral, because it was so quiet in there. And I found it strange myself, because the referee was looking around at the people, looking at Bruno, and was a little puzzled. He came over, raised my hand, and I said, "Okay, where's the belt?" "No, go back to the dressing room." He didn't want to give me the belt there because they thought I better get out of there, because the people were really acting strange. There's a lot of people crying, real quiet, like the storm, or the stillness before the storm type thing. And then he, finally got up, I guess, and I looked back out for the dressing room, and I could hear people crying, "Bruno, you'll get it back. You'll always be our champ," and stuff like that. And for a few seconds there, I felt bad. I was wrestling my hero and beat him, but not for too long, because that was really what made my career, I guess, there.
Yeah, that's really crazy. That would be an interesting time. Can you talk to us about sort of those kayfabe days and what it was like, I guess, even playing a Russian? I mean, did you have a lot of issues with fans and people coming after you?
Oh, yes, a lot. I ended up having situations where you had to fight your way to the ring and back. I had a couple different partners while I was there. One was Hans Schmidt, another was Big Cat Ernie Ladd, and we had riots with both of them. As far as being partners and coming back and going to the ring, I always like to have a good partner with me to hide behind, I guess. But there's definitely some tales to tell there, like I tell in my book. Is that wrestling fake? The bare facts by Ivan Koloff. That by incidentally people can get to Scott Teal, the author of the book. If you go to crowbarpress.com, I get a little plug in there for my book, crowbarpress.com. And anyway, I tell the story about how that Ernie the Cat Ladd, I believe it was in Rimouski. It was in Chicoutimi or Rimouski, a couple of the cities that we wrestled there that were real hot for wrestling. We always wrestled in the ice arenas because there's a lot of hockey up there. To put the ring in the middle of the arena type thing and put chairs around it, and the people up in the bleachers, of course, could watch it too. And had a good crowd there that night, I remember, and against the Rouge, because they were the champions. We won one fall from them, and we got disqualified by beating them up. And the second fall, that's all the people needed to see. They went crazy and attacked us and started throwing chairs into the ring, filled the ring up with chairs. And I remember, I said, man, how do you get out of this case? I even said, Big Cat, this is, man, what we do is crazy. You grab a chair, kid, and use it as a shield. Let's work our way back to the dressing room. And that's what we did. I just unfortunately had, just before going into the dressing room, we had to go down into a dugout to the dressing room. And that was where the hockey players usually went. And I had to look back, and that was a mistake as the chair came flying, hit me right in the nose. So
Wow.
they ended up getting a good one in before we got away. But that was just one incident. I've had so many fights to the ring, back from the ring, and just lucky it didn't get really seriously hurt or it didn't hurt somebody else, because I can remember having to throw people down and, try to make an example of him by being real rough with him so the others wouldn't jump on. It didn't always work because that situation is where the son would jump on after he threw the dad off, and, family members and that. But, exciting stuff. But, yeah, very dangerous, very dangerous. The people really up there were on fire, I guess. Well, they're allowed to drink in a lot of those arenas, and so they get a little extra courage, I suppose, with a couple of beers at a time, and they want to tackle us. And, a lot of different incidents from Puerto Rico to Boston Gardens to, New York to all over down here in the South, having to fight people and fight the crowd or just to try to stay alive in the ring, because I've had them come right in the ring after me, and luckily a couple times that they come in the ring right after me, I got a good shot in and was able to get the guy before he got me, but could have been easily the other way around, and that would really hurt your career, being knocked out by a fan,
Yeah, for sure. Now, you also kind of have the unique experience of I guess we're in it through some transitional periods, like it was probably very different from the 60s to the 70s and then into the 80s, and how it sort of became a completely different scene for wrestling and probably less dangerous, I'm assuming. Can you talk to us about kind of what that felt like, and if you ever thought it was going that direction? Or
not so much that it was safer, although they did have a good police protection in that. It was the idea that I believe wrestling changed in the 80s, of course, did change because of Vince Sr. passing, Jr. taking over, and he always wanted to govern wrestling, promote wrestling more as a Hollywood thing, I think, and I guess he proved to be correct today, because he's got a big business and been changed a lot to the part of more showbiz, I guess, more lights and which I guess you got to keep up with the time. So I guess you can't knock the success type thing. So, but yeah, I can just remember not only back when I started and during the first 15, 20 years, the territories were all over. Like the NWA consists of territories all over the world, and then Vince up there in the Mideast is hooked up with California, LaBelle and Mrs. Eaton out there. And they did a cable thing towards the end, and I guess that was the transition period just before pay-per-views or before going, before pay-per-views, I guess. That would be the way to say it. And that changed it, especially when Senior died, Junior took over. He went all out for that, and it changed wrestling. The other guys had to try to compete then, like the NWA and such, and I guess they found it hard to do that because although now I see there's a lot of fans I said coughing, I liked it in the old days better than now, type thing. But I guess it's whatever you're brought up around, you end up remembering, So in that sense there was a big change in the wrestling, and I really had a little difficulty myself because they started doing stuff like even with the Crockett's trying to compete against Vince, having this goal like plane ticket to go to Los Angeles. It'd be in Atlanta because the office became out of Atlanta when Ted Turner bought out the NWA and turned it to WCW, and then that made it a little difficult because you had to drive all the way to Atlanta to catch a flight and then drive all the way home to come back. And it was just the way they had it set up because they're trying to encourage guys to move to Atlanta again. And that's about the time I quit in '89 there, and I just went to the independent circuit because it was. But that was one thing that was different as far as the way the promotion went. Of course, I made it big time when I went pay-per-view because today it's just like it seemed like you got a special show every night going on or a couple a week. I guess a lot of money goes into it and a lot of thought. And I must say these young guys are very athletic, and some of the stuff they're doing, it's one of their, not more of them, put out of the business, hurt real bad because you can't do stuff like that, even if you're good at it without getting hurt. So, feel for some of the young fellows in that. But I guess the money makes up for it because sure they're being paid a lot more nowadays because of the pay-per-views and such. So, but, yeah, I guess I noticed it, especially talking from my point, and I could tell the other boys are really disturbed about it because for that last 5 years they're trying to compete and had us going all over the place. Private planes, the Crockett's had, Jim Crockett Promotion, Mid-Atlantic, and we're flying all over the place, and it made it. And they even had their pay-per-views, you might say, special shows, Starcade, Great American Bash, and such, back in those days. But, and they were doing good, I guess, with it. It's just that came right down to it when they sold out. They're having too much. I guess they made a couple bad decisions, Crockett's, and couldn't hang in there with Vince, and Ted Turner bought it out, tried it for a while, and he didn't want any more to do with it. So Vince ended up with it all. And I can remember back then the big difference really was, even though you made good money down south, because there was some big venues like, the Charlottes and the North Forks and the Richmonds, and so you'd have some big shows too. But just seeing the population-wise and consistent-wise as far as drawing, seemed like WWF up there was, of course, now it's WWE, had more big shows type thing. It seemed like every night pretty well. By the time they got around to all of the big shows, it was time to go around again, every month. And for that reason, the payoffs, I guess, were better than most territories. So most guys, especially if they're main eventers, would like to go up to New York. But everybody couldn't do it. So, of course, when Crockett's got out of it, and Ted Turner got out of it, it just narrowed down just to Vince McMahon and T.A, I guess, I might say. But I guess that'd be the big difference. I know the difference in rings, too, back in the day up north especially. They had a lot of boxing rings, which are harder because the footing, the boxer's legs would give out if it was too springy. And larger rings for boxing, and so we had to deal with that a lot. And anybody around the New York area, especially, with a lot of boxing rings, because commission area, boxing and wrestling commission, they insisted on those rings, I think, and it made it a little harder on the back, on the body. I wonder if Bruno needed time off from injuries because consistent like that, being bumped around with hard rings.
Yeah.
I'm sure, of course, the rings today is up to par, as good as any ever been. But that's part of growing and getting better, right? Is the idea of putting in better stuff and better products. And I guess he read it ahead of time, Vince Jr., and he's got the handle on it right now. So that's good.
Yeah, getting back a bit to your days when you were with the NWA, when I think of your career, I think of it as you're one of maybe a handful of guys that was a big name in the old days. You had big feuds with Pedro Morales and Superstar Billy Graham and Bob Backlund. And then you're one of the few guys who was also able to make that transition into the 80s and still be a big name, working with the Russians, with Nikita and Crusher Khrushchev. What are your thoughts on that? I think it says something about, maybe your versatility or your career that you were able to make that work in both of those eras.
Yeah, I guess probably it all goes by experience. I guess I was fortunate enough to be get the title up there in New York, and then when it came down here, by this time I was getting some years of experience in, and I guess the more you get, the better you get. I hope that was the case anyway, and it just propelled you into other promoters back then wanting you to come in their area, and so you had a choice more so than today, But I think that that was probably the main thing that caused me to become noticed, was the idea that I had the belt in New York, the Big Apple, which started going out all over the world. And people even had watched it before the cable or the pay-per-views and that, because they'd send the tapes over to Europe and that. And I didn't even know that back even before pay-per-views. Vince was ahead of stuff there, and I think that that probably ended up helping me to adjust to the situation, no matter where it was, whether I was in a smaller territory and have to fly around more, as far as be more active in the ring and dropping my weight, because at one time I was a little over 300 pounds. I had to go down to about 220, 215, because I felt that guys were just moving faster, and it was a more intense type of thing in the ring. You had to wrestle 7 days a week and travel and everything, that had to stay in real good shape to be able to keep up to the change, because it went from more mat wrestling to aerial stuff, and nowadays it's real aerial, as far as doing some real high-risk moves and everything. But I think that's what helped me adjust. Is after a while I got enough of experience of doing stuff that I was able to keep up, and I'm thankful for it, because I never figured myself as being degraded or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to stay in there and make that main event money, and
Sure.
I was lucky enough to do it.
Well, when you were describing your match with Sammartino when you won the belt and kind of the crowd heat that you received, I feel like your feud with Dusty Rhodes in the mid-'80s almost kind of matched that same feel from the crowd. I mean, people really did not like you.
That's right. Yeah, Dusty was good at stuff like that. Matter of fact, I believe it was his idea for the first coffin match down there in Houston, Texas, because I was coming out with my shovel and putting a mark on every time I defeated an American, and I guess he picked up on it, and he says, okay, Russian, now let's find out who's the best. You bring your shovel and that, I'll bring the coffin, and we'll have a battle and see who can win the match. Started the coffin match, and I don't know, maybe Dusty had that idea. Maybe he took that up to New York with The Undertaker. I don't know, but it sure seemed to be the same type of idea, but more advanced, more with The Undertaker. But I remember the people going crazy over that match and all that. And no matter where I went, I ended up wrestling Dusty, I guess, because I could just see that the people got into him, his interviews, his wrestling, and it was a natural, Russian American, and just to wrestle Dusty from Florida to out west, Houston, St. Louis, and the Atlanta area, here in the Carolinas. Yeah, I would wrestle him a lot. So, yeah, that probably is a good point. The idea that preparing me more for the programs type thing that they ran down here by having a guy like Dusty ended up learning me a lot or teaching me a lot. Yeah.
You were in here in Minnesota for a little while too, working in the AWA for Vern Gagne, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
72 and 73, yeah.
Yeah, what are your memories of those days? Because this was a pretty big territory back then as well.
Oh, yes, yeah. Real good memories as far as, being treated good. They treated me real good there as far as being advanced, I guess, or promoted on the television and stuff. in the matches. I got to wrestle Vern, I got to wrestle the Crusher, Bruiser, tag team with Superstar Billy Graham, and yeah, that was big territory because I used to fly away to Denver and then up to Winnipeg and all the Chicago area, Indianapolis. They were all combined together. The promoters worked together, and so it made it a pretty large area too. And yeah, fond memories of it. I know I got a quick wake-up call when I wrestled Vern. I think Vern wanted to, I guess, try to get the best out of you. And the way he did it with me was he locked up with me and hollered, slapped me in the ear. It felt like my eardrum was busted because my head was ringing and my balance up.
Wow.
I was about 300 pounds and, pretty strong in the weights and everything. He was like an AAU type of wrestler. So I guess he figured that he wasn't worried about that, and most of those guys didn't have to worry because guys like myself, even if you got, strength and everything, you go against a guy like that, unless you get your hands on him, and usually even then they know the counter to it. So, but he did get the best out of me that night because I know that made me hot because that hurt, I started kicking and punching as hard as I could, and anyway, the match, after the match, dressing room, the word came over to me that that's the way I like it.
Wow.
Vern Guy said that was his compliment back. That's the way I like it. So I said to myself, man, I don't get him too often. That's the way he likes it. I'm going to be dead all the time. But, yeah, I enjoyed it up there. I think I learned a lot, too, because, with guys, top names like that I watched in the business, the Crusher and the Bruiser and Vern and Mad Dog Vachon and, oh, man, so many guys, Bobo Brazil and Cedric Thomas, so many guys up there. I even met Jimmy Valiant up there at Chicago days, and of course the Blackjacks were there, and Wahoo. So I met a lot of guys who became very good friends later on, either friends out of just sincerely liking each other or respecting because they demanded it in the ring. You didn't end up discrediting a guy like Wahoo McDaniel and get away with it because that old engine would get hot. You'd have to, if you had to, he'd chop you in the nose. And,
Jeez.
Yeah, there's a lot of fond memories and some not so fond, but something I'll never forget because of what they entailed, just that sort of thing. But I did hurt my first bad injury that was about 12 years in the business. In 73, I ended up taking a backdrop and landing. Back then, there wasn't plywood underneath the canvas and the mat. There was boards. One of the boards flipped out and was overlapped. And when I came down on the backdrop, it just hit wrong and hit my back and caused a disc to rupture. And I was out for a couple months there. I remember hurting a lot. And that was my first experience with injuries and serious injuries. But it loosened up after a year or so, suffering and chiropractors and coming down here to the Charlotte area at 74. I had to heal up pretty quick to keep going. But just a lot of injuries over the years and a lot of experiences, man. I wouldn't trade for nothing, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a wrestler.
Yeah, so tell us again, where can we get the book and what it's called so we can read all about it, so everybody listening can read all about it? Yeah,
it's best to contact crowbarpress.com, like crowbar, like a bar, crow, C-R-O-W, crowbar, all one word, crowbarpress.com. That's Scott Teals. He was the author of the book, or co-author, what do you call it, and he keeps some in hand. I got a few here, but probably better off getting them from him. And also, you can go to my site, too, IvanKoloff.com. And, of course, I got pictures that I market. Helps my ministry there now. And if they want a souvenir, I got ordained here 10 years ago or so. And officiate weddings, and that's on my website, too. And end up making appearances and still going to different matches and such. More as, just as signed autographs and that, because the bump days are over, I guess, now. My few injuries, from it after 50 years. But yeah, I got a website there that I think it'd be interesting seeing if you haven't went there. As far as my daughter-in-law, or my daughter and son-in-law, they're gospel singers, and so they're really proud of them. HighwayRevival.com. The people out there, they're Christians and live in this area and like to have them come to their church. And the same with me. I don't perform weddings, I officiate weddings, but I end up going speaking at churches and bragging on the real champ, the Lord Jesus, and end up making appearances and whatever, either like card shows or wrestling matches and that. So just contact me on there. I appreciate it. My book is called, now, just like that, Is That Wrestling Fake? It's like a question. Is that wrestling fake? The Bare Facts by Ivan Koloff. The reason I named it that was I've been doing autographs for 20 years, Children's Miracle and that, and different stores and such, and every day it just seems there's somebody coming up. Ivan, tell me, is that wrestling fake? And I said, well, put it this way, if you think that Evil Knievel is fake, then probably wrestling is. But look at it this way, Evil Knievel knew what he was going to do ahead of time. He practiced what he did ahead of time. So if that's what you claim wrestling does, that's what Knievel did before he died. And he busted up with his body. I understand every bone in his body was broke. So I guess if that's phony, then I guess wrestling is.
Yeah.
That usually sets people up, because I said, and besides that, look, you could, why not go out there and make yourself a lot of money by being a wrestler if you think it's all displaying? But even today, what they're doing out there is very dangerous. I mean, if anything, more so in the sense that they're doing high-risk moves, off the top onto tables and over the top rope. I mean, it's just not more wrestling like we did as far as grabbing a hold or an arm and trying to make somebody submit or try to get his shoulder down there, wear him down or something like the old style. But they're still competing. And the money is that much better that I guess you get guys that get better and better at what they want. So, yeah, that's the way why I named the book that. And I guess people can relate with that. Yeah, get the book, and it really helps my ministry too. And I think you'd enjoy it because it makes a good little gift idea. And a lot of stuff that I haven't talked about today is in the book about personal experiences and things that happen and crazy stuff that I end up doing and get involved in, from fighting in bars and planes, and the idea of getting really in a lot of trouble with the health angle of it because of too much, I guess, drugs and alcohol that a lot of people suffer from today. But God's been good to me. Just once I started honoring Him and turned my life around as far as the drugs and that, and alcohol, and of course He's still working on me, and says He'll never leave me, never forsake me. So I'm in good shape there now, in good hands. So, but I really enjoy what I'm doing there now. I've got Mama here to help me, and my wife is Renee is real good. She's one that'll answer your emails, computers. There's a computer. She's the brains of the operation, you might say. I'm just trying to hang in there. But yeah, having a good time.
Well, good. Sounds
good. I appreciate
good.
the fans.
Yeah,
I appreciate the fans too.
I'm sure they all appreciate you. It's been great having you on the show, and we hope a lot of people hear it and buy your book and read all about it. It's been an honor.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And both you guys, thank you so much for allowing me to be on there, and maybe I'll get to see you someday. God bless.
You too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.